Okay, so let's dive in. Imagine the world right now. It feels like you're watching multiple really intense situations just converge all at once.
Yeah, absolutely. Missiles flying, major economic threats suddenly looming large, world leaders gathering.
Mm.
You can feel the pressure building.
Definitely. And the atmosphere, especially around mid-June 2025, like centered on everything that's happened since Friday the 13th, right through to today, Sunday the 16th.
Yeah.
It's been, well, electric is one word for it.
It really is a moment where you have these complex, high-stakes situations, not just happening side by side, but actively bouncing off each other
Hmm.
in real time.
Right. We've been digging through all the information you shared, looking at this sharp escalation between Israel and Iran, and also, the renewed tariff threats from the U.S.
And seeing how those two major forces are basically rewriting the agenda for the G7 summit that's just kicking off now in Canada.
Exactly. So our mission here is to try and cut through some of that noise, pull out the really critical pieces from the material, and, give you a clear picture.
Lay out what's happening, why it matters.
Yeah, and hopefully do it in a way that feels more like we're figuring it out together, not just reading a report. Keep it interesting.
Think of it as setting the scene. It's mid-June 2025. We're tracking events in the Middle East with immediate military and human costs.
And at the same time, watching how those events feed into global economic jitters and, well, the highest levels of diplomacy happening thousands of miles away, it's all connected.
Deeply interconnected.
Okay, so let's start with maybe the most alarming piece right now. This latest chapter between Israel and Iran. This isn't abstract stuff.
No, this is direct kinetic action, and it ramped up incredibly fast over just the last few days.
What's really striking is the speed, right?
Yeah.
It really kicked off with that surprise Israeli attack on Friday, June 13th.
Right. Hitting military sites inside Iran, and then, just hours later, Iran hit back a significant missile barrage aimed at Israel.
And it didn't just stop there. Today, Sunday the 16th, reports are coming in that Israel launched strikes for a third straight day.
It's a sustained exchange. This isn't just a one-off tit for tat anymore.
And the targets, they tell a story, don't they? Israeli strikes hit military targets, yes, but also specifically in Tehran.
Exactly. And Iran's missiles hit Tel Aviv and Haifa, major population centers. That's different from just hitting remote bases. It feels much closer, much more direct for civilians.
Which brings us to the human costs. It's just awful.
Fair.
The numbers emerging.
Yeah.
Well, they're grim.
Yeah, the count from Iran is 224 dead. And that includes some very significant figures.
Like Mohammad Kazemi.
Yes, identified as the intelligence chief of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, a really powerful part of Iran's military, plus 2 generals. That's a major blow.
And on the Israeli side, reports confirm 10 civilian deaths from those Iranian missiles.
It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitics, the back and forth, but then you hear something like the account from Aidan Bar.
Right, you share that. He was in Petah Tikva, near Tel Aviv.
Yeah, describing the bombing of his building, the sheer terror. He has 4 kids. Just imagining that fear. He said they were shaken, but okay, thankfully. But it really grounds the headlines, puts human face on it.
Absolutely. And this isn't random, of course. There are deep roots here. Israel clearly sees Iran's nuclear ambitions as, well, incredibly serious.
That's putting it mildly. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has consistently framed it as an existential threat for Israel. That perspective drives so much of their policy towards Iran.
And Iran. Their narrative is about responding to a violation of their sovereignty. There was that detail about President Pezeshkian reaching out to Iraq's prime minister.
Asking him basically to stop Israel using Iraqi airspace for these strikes. It just shows how neighbors get pulled into the vortex, even indirectly.
And the nuclear angle is always simmering just beneath the surface or sometimes right on top. Any updates there?
Actually, yes. Just today, June 16th, Rafael Grossi, he's the head of the IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog, he confirmed something important.
What's that?
He said that, for now at least, Iran's key nuclear sites at Natanz and Fordo haven't suffered further damage in these latest strikes. That's crucial because hitting those sites would be a major, major escalation point.
Okay, so that's a small bit of, well, not good news, but less bad news for now. But the economic shockwaves, those were immediate. Look at oil.
Instantaneous. Brent crude jumped, $1.70 to nearly $76 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate also gained over $1.60.
That's not just noise, that's fear pricing in.
Absolutely. And the fear is focused squarely on one place, the Strait of Hormuz.
Explain why that narrow waterway is such a big deal in this context.
It's basically the world's oil jugular vein. A massive percentage of global oil shipments has to pass through that narrow channel every single day.
So if this conflict escalates further,
If it somehow disrupts traffic through the strait, the impact on global energy would be immediate and severe. Prices would likely skyrocket, everyone would feel it.
it really hammers home how a regional conflict can hit wallets globally, almost overnight. Okay, so that's one huge tremor shaking things up. Let's shift focus now to another one, coming from a different angle but adding immense pressure. The economic moves from the U.S.
Yeah, you can't really understand the global picture this week without talking about Donald Trump's actions. We're seeing what looks very much like a return to that maximum pressure playbook.
Aimed primarily at Iran's oil exports, right?
Yeah.
Trying to choke them off.
Exactly. The stated goal is to push Iran's oil exports down near zero, using that economic leverage to try and force concessions on their nuclear program.
But the way they're doing it,
Yeah.
threatening huge tariffs and sanctions on anyone buying Iranian oil, particularly targeting China, it seems.
China's been a major buyer, yeah.
Yeah.
And the threat is explicit. We saw that statement from Trump on Truth Social.
Yeah, pretty blunt. Paraphrasing here, but
Okay.
basically, buy oil or petrochemicals from Iran,
Yeah.
and you're cut off from doing business with the U.S., period.
Leaves zero wiggle room. But actually enforcing that, that's the tricky part.
How so?
Well, the material described Iranian oil as slippery. There are all sorts of tactics used, like ship-to-ship transfers out at sea to disguise where the oil actually came from. It becomes a sort of high-stakes game of hide-and-seek on the oceans.
Hide and seek captures it well. And these tariff threats, they're not just about Iran, are they? It seems broader.
No, definitely broader. There's talk of bringing back those 25% steel and aluminum tariffs on G7 partners like Canada, plus others like Brazil, Mexico, South Korea.
So hitting allies, too.
Yeah, it's putting pressure across the board, not just on adversaries. It's a tactic aimed at leverage, seemingly everywhere.
And the reaction? Predictable, I guess.
Pretty much. The European Commission saying there's no justification. South Korea already talking about how to protect its steel industry. There are even reports, that India's Prime Minister Modi might be thinking about tariff cuts before meeting Trump, maybe to head off potential issues.
Wow, so it's already changing behavior, or potentially changing it.
And the big fear underlying all this is a potential global trade war that could really destabilize economies, mess up supply chains. It's a serious concern.
And markets are reacting already.
Oh, yeah. Investors are clearly spooked. You see wobbles in the markets, and the U.S. dollar is strengthening that classic flight to perceived safety when global uncertainty spikes.
Okay, so intense military conflict in the Middle East driving energy fears.
Yeah.
And this sweeping economic pressure campaign creating global trade anxiety. And both roads lead to.
The G7 summit in Canada, kicking off today, June 16th.
Right. That's where the leaders of the big industrialized democracies, U.S., U.K., Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, are all meeting. And you can bet what's top of the agenda.
Absolutely. Forget the usual pleasantries. This summit is dominated by trying to manage the Israel-Iran crisis and navigate Trump's trade pronouncements.
And the Middle East conflict isn't just a discussion topic at the G7, right? It's having real-world security impacts in G7 countries.
Exactly. We're seeing reports that leaders like Germany's Chancellor Merz, before he even left for the summit, announced increased security for Israeli and Jewish institutions. France is doing the same.
So the fear is real, that the conflict could somehow spill over, maybe inspire attacks abroad.
That seems to be the concern, yes. It shows they don't see this as just contained to the Middle East. When tensions are this high, they have to prepare domestically.
Makes sense. And Trump's role at the summit itself adds another layer, particularly on the Iran issue.
Well, there was that very specific detail noted in the material that he reportedly vetoed an Israeli plan to target Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei.
Wow. That's direct U.S. intervention in Israeli military planning, right at the highest level, just as he's meeting other world leaders.
It's significant, and his public messaging on Iran right now is, well, characteristic.
How so?
On one hand, urging diplomacy, which sounds like de-escalation, but then almost in the same sentence, warning Iran about the full strength and might of the U.S. armed forces if they don't comply.
So the carrot and the very big stick.
Pretty much. He put out a statement just yesterday, June 15th, hinting at talks, but also flexing military power at levels never seen before. It's keeping all options open, maximum pressure alongside a potential off-ramp.
It must be an incredibly difficult balancing act for the other G7 leaders, trying to manage the immediate security risks from the conflict while dealing with potential economic chaos from trade wars.
For sure. The G7 summit isn't just a meeting room, it's like a pressure cooker, where these global forces are colliding right now.
So bringing it all together for you, our listener, how do these threads connect? What we're seeing is just how tightly wound the world is.
Yeah, the link is crystal clear. Conflict flares up in the Middle East, and boom, oil prices jump globally because everyone worries about supply, especially through Hormuz.
And at the same time, trade threats from one major player, the U.S. in this case, send shivers through global markets and strain relationships between allies.
And the G7 summit becomes the focal point. It's where leaders have to deal with both. They're upping security back home because of events thousands of miles away.
And they're walking into tough talks about tariffs and trade because of decisions made in Washington. The security fears and the economic risks are completely intertwined.
It really shows how localized events and specific national policies just don't stay local anymore. They ripple out instantly, demanding a global response, whether it's coordinated or sometimes pretty chaotic.
Right. So just to recap quickly, we've looked at this really specific, intense, and tragic conflict between Israel and Iran, the human cost, the regional risks like the Strait of Hormuz.
We've explored Trump's broad economic pressure campaign, hitting Iran but also raising tariff threats against traditional allies.
And we've seen how the G7 summit in Canada is now the crucial stage where leaders have to grapple with the combined weight of both these crises at the very same time.
It's a stark reminder of how linked everything is. Conflict over there raises prices over here, trade decisions ripple across oceans. It demands incredibly careful navigation.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. When you look at the specifics, the names, the places, the exact dates, how fast all this escalated and interconnected, what does that speed tell us about the fragility of the global system?
Yeah, how vulnerable are we to these simultaneous shocks, military and economic? And maybe more importantly, how ready are our international institutions, our leaders, to actually manage these multi-layered crises when they hit all at once like this?
That's definitely something we're thinking about as this all continues to unfold.
It certainly is. A complex picture, no doubt.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.